Hello, welcome back to 1874, to my office, which is, we've got the worst setup, I think, that you could possibly ever have to try and do an in-person show today. Jacob's obsessed with doing in-person content nowadays. So you'll notice I'm having to hold my microphone, and then when Jacob speaks, I'll have to pass him the microphone. But we are here to get inside Aston Villa's latest terrible result, which was yesterday away at Sunderland 1-1 against 10 men. Jacob was speaking to Emery after the game. Those kind of explosive quotes that Emery came out with after the game were due to Jacob. So, Jacob, just first, what was your thoughts on the performance?
Firstly, when I say we want to do in-person podcasts, I didn't quite envisage this. I didn't think it would be in your office. I thought we'd do it somewhere else. But just on the game, came back this morning, belated, had a punch and tie on the way home, which kind of summed up the weekend, really. I had an idea, and I had heard that Unai wasn't too happy with the result. He's kind of rattling around interviews, and I'd heard that he'd mentioned the word lazy. So as a journalist, you want basically him to repeat that and him to be honest, because often when they come to press conferences, it's like their final interview, and by that time they're probably calmer. They probably don't give you as much. I wanted Emery at his most raw, really, because I want him to give his honest assessment. When they get into press conferences, they often probably fed up of repeating the same thing for the broadcasters, so they don't really give you that much. So I obviously tend to ask Emery the first question. So asked the first couple, asked about the style of play, the identity, because I know and I heard from him and other people that he felt Villa had lost that. And then you get to the third question, and I thought, can I ask him about the energy, lack of energy, or perceived lack of energy? And then he came up with that line really about lazy, and he kept repeating. He must have repeated it 10 times in 3 or 4 sentences. So he meant it. It wasn't like a slip of the tongue. It wasn't like one of those where the press officer will speak to you afterwards and go, he didn't mean it like that. He meant it like this. This was quite honest and frank from him. And even though it was his last interview, he still did it. And what was interesting is, for away games, normally the away manager comes in first because they want to go off. The Sunderland manager came in first, so Emery clearly had to have some time to decompose and calm down. But at the same time, he was still very angry. I found myself when I drove home thinking, are Villa really in crisis? But I keep thinking it's only five games old. The league season, we're still in September. Well, it can't be like that. So I do feel like it's wary. You can't be too reactionary. You can't be too hyperbolic in your coverage. But at the same time, you just have to be honest and tell the truth. And what's happening is, yes, the players are flat. Yes, there's a lack of confidence. There's a flatness internally. The mood's somber. Can they turn it around? I back Emery to do it. But my word, there's a lot of challenges facing them.
Yeah, because I'm watching them at the moment, and it's almost like, I think if I didn't know any better, you're watching a team that's not playing for the manager here. Like, it looks like end-of-day stuff. Now, I don't think it is end-of-day stuff at the moment. I don't think anything's going to happen managerial-wise, although I would say at the moment that this time next year, I'm not sure he's going to be here. That's my personal opinion. But watching them at the moment, and him coming out and saying almost that they're not following instructions, not playing in the way he wants. What does he want? Because we're so slow and ponderous in the build-up, but yet he speaks about Harvey Elliott after the game, almost saying he's too quick. That, to me, was one of the most alarming things that I heard after the game, was not that he's calling the players lazy. It's that Harvey Elliott's been too quick on the ball, when I'm watching us every single week and thinking, that's exactly what we should be doing.
Yeah, I think you can take the Harvey Elliott quotes out of context. Really, he wants them to be precise and controlled and keep the structure, but then he needs that change basically in the final third. That you're not seeing that. I think if Villa were more cutting in the final third and play quicker combinations, there wouldn't be that perception of them being slow. They would be seen as methodical and controlled. With Harvey Elliott, similar to what Guardiola said about Jack Grealish, I guess, in terms of he does want raking passes. There's one point, and I picked up on it during the game, Harvey Elliott got the ball. He's so eager to impress. He got the ball like halfway line and tried that real 30, 40 yard pass out to the left. And Emery just turned around in anger. It's because he'd rather him connect shorter passes in the middle and work the way up ball up to that pitch, up to that part of the pitch, and then you can combine quickly. You see it a lot with Emery. There's a few times when Villa fans at Villa Park want to go forward quickly, and then it might be Kamara who will just take a few touches, allow the team to get into rest defence, allow the team to get into positions where, okay, they're solid behind the ball, and Emery will applaud whilst the fans groan. That's what he wants. That's the style of play he wants. And he pinpointed Harvey Elliott. Okay, I was quite surprised when he singled him out because no one had asked about Harvey Elliott. But it was an example off the top of his head where he thought they're not attacking like I want. They're rushing their work. And when they rush it, transitions happen. And that's obviously the biggest enemy of Emery in terms of if you do risky passes, ball gets intercepted, you attack. There's a reason why Villa were towards the bottom the last 2 seasons for switches of play. They don't want to make these 60, 80-yard passes. They want to do shorter passes. And that was one example of Villa losing their identity, as Emery said, and going away from the game plan.
I can't work out what the game plan is at the moment, because what we're doing, it's not just one game, is it here? We're talking like 5 Premier League games, a cup tie now, where it's not working, it's not connected. I don't recognise Villa on the ball, and I don't recognise Villa off the ball, to be honest, either. We've been pretty resolute. Like, we haven't conceded loads of goals, and that's fine. I don't even think, though, now, and I've thought about this, that the way they're playing defensively is kind of come at the expense of what they're doing attacking-wise. They're just not doing anything attacking-wise, and people are laying into Rodgers and Watkins at the moment. Obviously, they're going to be the main goal scorers in this team, you would think, and we're not really scoring goals, so understandable that they'll be the ones that there's questions asked of, and Watkins could have scored at the end of the game yesterday. I don't dispute that. But Rodgers thrives in playing in transition. That's not happening because we're so slow and we're slow, ponderous and so methodical that you're not getting the best out of Rodgers. He's not that type of footballer. You saw how he shone for England the other week when he made that excellent little flick through and England scored off it. England were very transitional, playing with pace and purpose at that point. Villa just haven't done that at a single point this season. So we're not going to get the best out of Morgan Rodgers because we're not playing in a style that advocates the best of Morgan Rodgers.
Yeah, I think if you ask Emery, he's not the one going out and saying, right, you've got to be really, really slow. I think obviously he wants control, but he wants there to be purpose. That Champions League season when they qualify for it, they were unbelievable in transition. One of the best teams in Europe for it. Diaby, Bailey, Watkins. There's pace. When Rodgers set up Madueke, he had a right winger who actually is a right winger and he had pace to run it behind. He's got Gesson. Gesson is not right winger. He can play there if he wants to, but he's not going to hold with. He doesn't know the timing of runs. Madueke makes brilliant runs. Gesson's not there yet. Leon Bailey at his best, I think you see a better Rodgers, but there's no right winger. Sancho, I keep thinking he can play there, but he's not going to be a guy that runs in behind. You have to tweak the way you build up. So I think Rodgers hasn't been good. I don't think his energy, his application, his attitudes looked at his best, but he's not got a balanced squad. And when you build a squad, you have to get the best. And you're bigger than some of your parts. Villa haven't got that because of the recruitment, but because players like Rodgers are going down. What I will say is, Rodgers even said himself, teams are figuring him out. They know not to give him space on transition. Even when he gets the ball, there's always someone up against him. Everton, Tarkowski went straight through him. It happened yesterday as well, which led to the corner which Villa scored from, somewhere straight through him. Villa know that their biggest attacking threats are Watkins and Rodgers. They said it before the start of the season. A couple of people said to me, we're relying probably too much on those two to score. If they have a few bad games, we're probably going to find things difficult. And when there's that pressure from internally for Rodgers to produce, coupled with the fact that actually Rodgers is not really an unknown quantity anymore, and his stock's gone huge, and managers are thinking, right, if you stop Rodgers, we stop them through the middle, then it's going to be difficult, isn't it? What I will say, if you're playing against a low block and you haven't got space for Rodgers, you might as well put Rodgers on the left wing or right wing to take him outside that real pressure mid-central block and get him the ball on the wings, and that's where he can get maybe a few more touches combined. Him playing as a number 10 in a deep block, it's hard. But his final ball, him and Emi Buendia's pass appreciation yesterday was terrible, wasn't it? Like, Buendia, I think his instincts are good. He gets in good positions, but it looks just a bit hard for him at the moment. And if you've got Buendia struggling, the onus is on Rodgers even more. Even the fact that Buendia's playing, I don't want to dig him out and I keep saying this, but it just feels so backwards to me. It feels like a complete backward step that he's actually in the starting 11 and has played the last 2 Premier League games. Away from that, what do you think? How do you think the players will react to almost being they've been called out? He's never really done that, has he? He's always protected the players through the whole time you've covered the club, through the whole time he's been there. He's never called the players out, used words like lazy. Do you think he's trying to just get a reaction out of them, or do you think he's just genuinely frustrated with what's happening at the moment? I think he was genuinely angry. I'm not sure he's that calculated in that precise moment to think I'm going to say lazy. I think it was just his pure emotions. He's done it before, but not to the extent of criticising their attitude. I think a few times, I remember away to Monaco when they lost, he referenced the attitude of players. And when he got pressed on it, he kind of takes a step out of it. And but this time against, obviously, Sunderland, he was concerted. He kept saying lazy. It wasn't just a slip of the tongue and he wrote back on it. He kept saying it. So that's probably the angriest I've seen him. But Club Brugge, when Mings handballed it, he was fuming in that change room. A lot of things were said. And he got a reaction after that, ultimately. And when next time they went to Bruges, they won. The question is, will he get a reaction from these players? These players are already flat. They're lacking confidence. He's obviously seen it as he needs to be tough on these players. He supported them a lot. Early in the week, he was trying to change perception, wasn't he? In terms of saying, we've had 2 draws against Brentford and Everton. We're building. He was trying to put a positive spin on things. Now he's like, they're not playing in my identity. He's had a real gear change. These footballers, he's given them a lot. He's pushed them to their limits, really. Maybe they are at their limits now. They need to show a reaction for him, really. He's a manager that's got more out of some of these players than they could ever think of getting out of themselves. Now their manager needs them, and that's why he needs to see a reaction. And this is why I worry of going overboard, really, because you play Bologna, you play Fulham, you win 2 of them inside 4 days. All of a sudden, the garden's a little bit rosier, isn't it? But right now, it does look quite bleak, because there's not one thing you say is encouraging about the way they're playing. It's quite dysfunctional all over the pitch. I think defensively they've been, like you say, they've been fine. And Mings, I think, is really important to that. But in possession, actually creating chances, it's difficult.
I suppose 2 of the better ball players aren't there at the moment. Pau Torres isn't playing because I think he obviously thinks it's more important to be defensively sound at the moment, and he thinks that Mings gives us that at a time when we're not particularly prolific, which is fine. Tielemans is obviously out as well, but even when Tielemans was there, I wouldn't say it looked particularly great. It was almost like we were waiting for the transfer window to shut and a line to be drawn under certain things like the Emi Martinez saga. But that's happened. That's all over, and the players haven't reacted. The club as a whole doesn't feel like they've reacted. It suddenly doesn't feel like everything's pulling in the same direction. And I've always felt that we've had bad runs under Emery before. I don't think anything that's felt this bad, but we have had bad runs. There was a run last season, wasn't it, 6 to 8 games where we didn't really do anything, but I felt like everyone was together. The body language of certain players at the moment were just what I'm saying. Even Emery himself, the walk down the tunnel at the end of the game, I feel like he's trying to prove a point, but I'm not sure what that point is that he's trying to prove. There's just a lot of little things at the moment. When you add it all together, it feels like it's just creating one big cloud over the whole club. And I take your point that suddenly if they win on Thursday and they win on Saturday, things are better. But I don't think they're solved, because you've used words like dysfunctional, unbalanced. Even if we win a game, all those things are still going to be there. I think Emery's got to do something here in terms of the formation, make a change. We've got to do something that's going to get the best out of our big players, because this 4-2-3-1, it isn't working. And I don't see how it's going to work. If we just keep rolling the same thing out over and over again, the same things are going to keep happening. So it does almost feel to me that he has to change the system. There's something fundamentally wrong with the system now, whether it's just not working or they've been found out or whatever. Something I think big has to change here at the moment.
I actually think less is more to some extent, because Emery's so demanding, and when things are going well, everyone uses that as a positive. We used it all the time. The amount of analysis sessions, absolutely fantastic. But at some point, inevitable that there was going to be burnout, wasn't there? The messages wouldn't always get through, and that's not through anyone's fault. It's because when you're with each other all the time, coupled with the European games, and you're having hours of pre-match meetings, 3 or 4 meetings per game or before a game, at some point this message just stops. Emery doesn't give that many days off. I wonder whether this week, probably not this week because of Bologna, but international break coming up, where you just don't train, you don't do anything, you just relax, let players who maybe not with their countries go away, just step out the bubble and then come back. And that could be like your refresher almost. And that hopefully could improve just some things on the pitch. Tactically, I think I've said it from June when we spoke, there had to be an evolution into that team. They couldn't look the same again, because teams know what they're doing. You see Sunderland, they're switching the play all the time, taking advantage of Villa's narrow outer-shaped block. You see teams not pressing the centre-backs because they don't want Yuri Tielemans or Kamara to get the ball, and then therefore feed Rodgers. Rodgers are getting tight. Watkins is 1v1 against the centre-back Mukulele yesterday. He's going straight up him. But that's accentuated by their lack of quality. There's numerous times Everton worked the ball quite well. Last year, it probably ends up in a result. Watkins is receiving the ball head height, chest height. He's barely getting a chance. Buendia is obviously not the one providing it. But again, if you shut your eyes and you think, what are Villa looking like when the ball's on the centre and on the mid halfway line? You know what they're going. Every game they're the same almost. Yeah, you have Luca Dink high, Cash tucking in, right winger. Gesson now is making the similar type of runs that last week. Similar type of runs Leon Bailey would. Everything's the same. And that's obviously because they're so well drilled. But at the same time, it's just like, I get the structure, but you need to see something different almost. Something different every game where you think, oh, I like that. That's different. You don't really see it. The only change is probably, the centre fielder drops into right side centre back. That's like the only tangible change you ever see.
I used to see that with Villa. I used to think that every game there'd be something different, whether it would be like, Martinez is going to clipping the ball and going slightly longer this game, or this game Kamara's dropping back into a 3. The game before he wasn't. Like, there was always these subtle differences. At the moment, I do feel like he's rolling the same thing out every single week. I'm not seeing these little changes. I suppose it's not helps in that I don't think he knows his best 3 off Watkins at the moment. I don't think he knows what that looks like or what that is. Maybe it's something to do with, he wants to get Sancho's fitness up and Elliott to get more used to his demands and what he wants. But the fact that Elliott didn't start yesterday away at Sunderland, like we need something new, we need something fresh, we need something different. I don't get why he keeps rolling out almost the same thing in some ways, but then he just kind of feel like he's scratching around as well for the right combinations, and he's kind of doing it in the games, which isn't the way you do things, is it? You want to be doing that ideally in training, coming up with a solution rather than using the games to do that. And why are we so rubbish against 10 men? You'll know from the short time you've covered the club, if a team goes down to 10 men, we might as well leave the pitch and say, we're not going to win today. See you later. See you next time. Why can't we break down 10 men? Why does Sunderland look at times the more likely team to do something in that game?
I think it was particularly acute yesterday because of the confidence levels and the fact that I think Villa probably thought, oh my gosh, like we can't score, and now we've got to try and work out a way to score, and the pressure's on us to score. What I don't understand is when Sunderland go down to 10 men, they go into a back 5, so that's one less player high up the pitch. Villa are still building their back 3. It's a 3v1. They don't need that extra man there. It can be a 2v1 instead. Put that extra player, Cash, further forward, and therefore you can put more in the back line, and then you can start to sustain in attacks a little bit more. That's just me talking as a layman, but I thought there'd be some way of Villa overloading the box. The lack of creativity is not great. So you think a way to get around that is why don't we just put more crosses in the box? Why do we overload them? Let's get Rogers Watkins. I'm doing this piece on Watkins maybe after the Bologna game. I've watched a lot of footage where Watkins might run into the channel, but there's no one taking his position up front. There's no one in the box. And you know what? The last 10, 15 minutes against Sunderland, when Villa were really chasing, they actually started to load the box up, and there was a few chances. And listen, if Marlon scores, if Harvey Elliott scored on target, great, Villa win the game. But it can't really mask the failings that the team are still undergoing at the moment. And yeah, I like to see a few more changes. That first season I covered Villa, I remember the 6-1 against Brighton, Martinez was clipping everywhere, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. He's identified a weakness in De Zerbi's system, and he's done it. Here, again, a lot of it's the same, but the risk that Emery has is if he just completely changes everything, then that structure that he's coached fundamentally evaporates, and what's he got as a coach? There's nothing then. If the structure he's built for 3 years is basically stopped being used now, what messages does that send to the players? Is he second guessing himself? And that's the type of thing that managers consider. These managers are not as flexible as we'll play 4-5-1 today, or we'll play 4-3-3 next week. These managers want a system that they stick to, because if they don't, they're seen as weak by their players. I'm not saying that's the case of Villa, but that is the risk that you do have.
There's a lot of talk of cycles in football all the time, and there's been a lot of noise around the fact that Emery's never really stayed anywhere that long. I think 3 years has been about the max that he's been at a club, and he's coming up to 3 years at Villa now, being at the helm. Do you think it's anything to do with that? Do you think is he getting a bit tight? I keep talking about his body language and the way he's acting. Is he frustrated? Have the external factors of being manager at Aston Villa with what's gone on in the transfer window? We've talked about it getting at the players. Has it got at him as well? Has it almost drained him, do you think?
I think he was more frustrated this time last season. He looked a bit more, when I see him as press conference, he looks actually quite motivated now. Obviously, during the games he gets frustrated, but beforehand he looks quite fresh, very polite. I don't know if this 3-year thing is a case. I think it's quite easy to say, like, a bit like Mourinho's third season. What I will say is it is stagnant because they've not evolved the squads. We did that piece last week on the average age of the squads, obviously the oldest so far in the Premier League, and 9 of the starting 11 against Sunderland were there predating Emery. So it's going to be stagnant, especially when you have a manager that's so demanding, that does so many analysis sessions, long training sessions as well. At some point, it's going to plateau, isn't it? You're going to reach a ceiling. So that's why this team's had to evolve, and they've had to evolve from a position of strength. Maybe they had to be ruthless. I know their hands were tied behind their back with PSR and SCR and all those things. Maybe we do move on Emi Martinez, and I do think they would have moved him on if they were able to secure the replacement. It's interesting. Like today, there's a few goalkeepers that were mentioned to me that I had no idea, and that's because they wanted to do things quietly, and they wanted to maybe move on Martinez quietly, and then you can bring in that player, and they wanted it to be quite seamless. That didn't happen. That's one example. Maybe you look at other players where you think maybe they've been here for too long, maybe they can't improve anymore. And Emery wants to improve every year. He wants Europe. He loves Europe. He knows that if you're not in Europe, he doesn't enjoy managing as much. Can these players every single year get Europe? They're getting older. Maybe they've reached their potential and they've had an amazing run, but you need to change at some point. And it's hard because a lot of these players have a big connection to Emery, but maybe it's for the best that Villa did try and move on the squad. Because let's be honest, at the start of summer, people were expecting an exodus. People were expecting more than just a Rams and Bailey leaving. You did think there'll be quite a few and a lot of change, a lot of turnover. It hasn't really happened, where I think in hindsight, I think Villa would have probably moved on a few more and brought some more in.
So where do we go from here? Because at the moment, I am genuinely struggling to see the turning point. I'm genuinely struggling to see where something changed. I think we'll probably beat Bologna at home on Thursday, a different competition. I think that probably helps. But then you take on Fulham again on Sunday, and I've seen a bit of Fulham this season. A decent outfit. Like, they don't really make loads of changes, but they've got a new winger who's quite exciting, hasn't started a game yet. I expect he'll probably start against Villa on Sunday and look very good. But yeah, they haven't had that change. They probably wanted to make more signings, but yeah, when I watch them, I think they are playing for the club. They are playing for the manager. It's very, very different from what I'm seeing with Villa. But do you genuinely believe it will turn? Or do you think, I just can't see it at the moment? I'm so positive normally, but I just can't see what's going to change from what we're doing at the moment.
It's been a bit of a downbeat podcast, and I feel like I'm just a reporter of gloom at the moment, and it's not ideal. But what I will say is I feel like Villa, before the FA Cup semi-final, there's a bit of an inferiority complex. Villa are a bloody good side when they want to be. I don't understand what's happened where they're not attacking and ripping teams and going for their throat early on, especially at Villa Park. You think of this team, you've got Watkins' pace, Rodgers' strength, you've got brilliant aggression in McGinn, Kamara, the guy with Tillemans. Use it. Why are Villa just prodding themselves and poking and feeding their way into games? I can understand it to an extent from away from home to some games, but I think they can go for it a bit more. I know Emery's always so guarded against, we need to stop transitions. But I think if Villa just focus on themselves, I think it will help a lot. Again, the squad's imbalanced, and I think that this will be an issue for as long as it is. But Villa can improve. They're a good side. They've got a great manager. And I hope to God they do, because it's not fun. Obviously, it must not be fun supporting them, but it's not fun reporting on at the moment. Contrary to what people think, it's not fun to be a journalist and bring in negative news all the time.
You've made me think of something there, though, with what you've said about us focusing on us and being ourselves. So we've had 2 great wins against Newcastle at home under Emery, and it came from going full tilt from the off. Early goals, I think, in both games, or certainly early big chances in both games, where we took the game to them. We got the crowd behind us. The atmosphere was electric. I think from day one we've set our tone, set our stall out. Newcastle, we did not do that. We didn't try and play the way that we've done previous times under Emery, where we beat them well. We did kind of sit back and try and feel our way into the game. We got caught in the transition early on, which maybe didn't help things, and obviously we got sending off later in the game. But when I say I don't recognise Villa going forward this season, that's what I'm talking about, because we had the chance in the first game at home to go out there and make a statement, And we didn't. I don't really feel like there was that much negativity around at that first game. It was only maybe after the first game and the transfer window was coming to an end and it was clear we weren't going to do very much. That was when negativity crept in, when we lost to Brentford the way that we did. That Newcastle game, I think everyone felt okay. I was predicting us to finish 5th in the league. Like I never saw this coming. People can say they saw a difficult season coming maybe, but I don't think anyone in their wildest nightmares could say, I saw this coming. I knew it'd be difficult. I knew we wouldn't score any goals. I knew we wouldn't win any of our first 5 Premier League games. Oh, no one ever thought that, in my opinion. And we had that chance in that first game to go out there and make some noise, and we didn't do it, Jacob.
And there's no Isak, right? And if you want to be negative, you could say Villa have been quite lucky in all games, really. They've got points in. No Isak. Gordon misses us, 2 good chances that a number 9 would probably finish. Everton, Beto misses chances. If he scores it early on, could be a tough day. Sunderland don't go down to 10 men. they could win that game. So really, in all games, all 6 games Villa played in all comps, they could lose every single one. And that's not great. But I just think Villa are lower than Worm's belly at the moment. They will improve. They're too good not to. And I think it's easy to get stuck in this negative spiral and think Villa are just terrible at everything. And right now they are terrible at a lot of things, but they can improve. They will get better. Emery will find the answers. But the case is, will these answers that he finds and the solutions be long lasting and improve Villa and match basically what he wants in terms of every year? He wants constant progression. This year is probably not going to be as good as the previous years. How do Villa react? How do they react in the winter months when it's going to be a slog and it's tough and they haven't got the goal of qualifying for the Champions League? Can they still do it? Are they still behind Emery? I think this season you'll see a lot. And I think we're hypothesizing, we're guessing the answers are going to be there. If we in January and the things are going badly, you'll see the answers. Are the players playing for him? No, they won't have been. Right now, I think it's too early. But right now, it's very difficult to see how Villa improve so they're a good side again. I think they'll fix certain things, but being a top 5, top 8 team, it's going to be very difficult. And if Emery can get top 7, I think it's probably his best achievement at Villa, actually, considering the restraints and considering the adversity he's currently facing.
Stupidly, I do still think top 7 can happen because when he came in, we gave everyone a 12-game head start, didn't we, under Steven Gerrard, and he did come up, turn it around, and we got 7th under Emery. So it's definitely, achievable, all's not lost. But you're kind of talking about getting to January and maybe, it's quite clear we're not going to be gunning for the Champions League. Do you think then that makes the scenario where Emery kind of puts all his eggs in the Europa League basket because it's a winnable trophy? Well, I thought it was a winnable trophy, but it's a shot at the Champions League. It's a shot at winning a trophy. Kills 2 birds with one stone. If the league season continues to dwindle in the way in which it is, can you envisage a scenario where in 2026 we're almost like, forget the league, it's all out Europa League here because we want to be back in the elite competition? Because I imagine if we were, you said as well, how much credence Emery puts on being in Europe. If we were to qualify for no form of Europe, that I really do think that might be the end of Emery.
Would be inclined to agree with you, actually. He always says Premier League's the most important, and I think as a manager, you have to be an optimist, and he'll keep going until it's mathematically impossible to get to Europe, and he will keep putting credence. But there will be that temptation where you're progressing and you're getting through the rounds in Europe, and he thinks, actually, you know what, this is the best way. Like we say, he loves Europe. He spoke to me today. He buzzes off it. He loves it. He's been in. We'll have to check the data, but he's been in Europe for how many consecutive years now? A lot. Huge amount, and he sees himself belonging in that competition. If Villa don't get Europe, then he will have to assess and take stock of himself and what his current projects at Villa is. But I think he'll continue to fight in the Premier League until he can't. But balancing a tough Premier League schedule with Europe is difficult, and there is huge pressure, isn't it, to make this European campaign good, not only because you want to win a trophy, but almost, if it carries on like this, to kind of like save the season almost.
Maybe Villa are Tottenham Hotspur this season. I didn't really see that coming, but maybe I did get asked earlier on Sky actually if I'd take finishing 17th and winning the Europa League, and I said 5 weeks ago absolutely no chance, but right now I think maybe I would. Things feel that bad. Okay, I think that probably does us. I think we've drag the mood down enough. No, but it's really, really hard at the moment. Jacob's getting further and further out of the screen as well. He's desperate to make an escape from podcasting about Aston Villa. He's very sunny in here as well. So I don't think this has been the most aesthetically pleasing podcast in the world ever. It probably hasn't been the most pleasant to listen to either, but we did just want to try and get inside that Sunderland, I need to defeat then, that Sunderland draw yesterday, another bad result for Villa, and just try and work out what's going on and how things are going to improve. So this show has been sponsored by NordVPN. If you head to 1874.io/NordVPN, you can check out what they can do for you and how they can help you get some extra football in your life, which is always a nice thing. I like to have as much football in my life as possible.
And just to end the podcast quickly, I did interview Dean Smith earlier this week. Very positive man. He said to tell everyone up the Villa from him. He's a really nice guy. And also, just before we did this, I spoke to Chad Williams as well. You guys probably know him from his podcast, and what a man he is. So there will be some positive Villa coverage and things going on. But right now it does seem bleak, and I apologise for that and bringing your mood down this afternoon.
I did do when I did the live yesterday. I did say, like, Villa journalists and Villa YouTubers or podcasters or whatever, they can't really control what's going on the pitch. So people get very upset after we've not won a game, which is understandable, but it's out of our control, and we can only talk about what we see and what we hear. And at the moment, there's not much positivity coming out. So I look forward to the Dean Smith and the Chad piece that's coming on the Athletic, because that will be some welcome respite. Hopefully we can get something out the next couple of games. It would do us good to get off to a good start in the Europa League, and surely that first Premier League win, I'm not seeing much evidence of it, but surely that first Premier League win has got to come sooner rather than later. A win at home against Fulham is a must. I think it's must-win game territory for Villa in the Premier League now. So thanks for all the support that you give Jacob and myself. Thanks for all the support you give the channel. Apologies again for the kind of gnarly setting that we've got going on today. We'll get something better for an in-person pod very, very soon. But as ever, take care, and as always, up the Villa.